Okay, welcome to Relic Raiders. We'll be demonstrating the rulebook is at version 3.0 right now. And so gameplay seems pretty solid, so shouldn't be additional changes shouldn't be too much from what you see here. But we are on 3.0 at the moment. So let me show you setup. Of course, there's only 9 cards, and they're double-sided. The one side looks like this, and the other side looks like this, like a dungeon tomb map type of thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to shuffle these 9 cards, and you're going to make a little 2x2 grid in the middle of the board. Then you're going to deal 1 card to each player. And then you're actually going to make a little... it's not going to work good here. Okay. It's not going to line up good here. 1 second. Okay, then you flip over the non-map part. Okay, so these are the starting cards for the game. The first player, which we'll put on the bottom here, he starts on the bottom left. He'll be green. The second player is red and starts in the upper right. And then the second player, since green is going to go first, the second player can put the relic, which is our goal, in one of 2 spots to start the game. He can put it in this corner here or this corner here. So one of these 2 inside corners that don't have player tokens on them. So let's just say he's going to say here for right now. And then these are lock cubes. These are for showing whether a card can be manipulated or not. So right now, when you start the game, the 2 cards that the players start off on become locked. And so they can't immediately be rotated or swapped. They got to be, these have to go away before that can happen. And so these 2 dice here are for the solo mode, which we'll explain later. And basically that's the setup, and you're ready to go. So we'll pause here. So as explained earlier, the players need to be the first to get to the relic. In order to do that, there's 9 actions available in the game for them, all based on these cards. So I'm going to step through these cards one by one and kind of show you what the actions are available to the player. Okay, so let's go through the 9 actions available. We'll start with the most basic at first. You'll notice all the actions have an associated icon with them, just to help you remember. Let's start with the basic move action. It's a move 1 space. So the player taking a move action just moves 1 space, can't jump through walls or anything like that, just following the map, moving 1 space in any direction. Okay, the relic action is very similar to the move action. It's very basic. Basically, the player choosing this can move the relic 1 spot in any direction. Again, following a legal move of not jumping over walls or anything like of that nature. Okay, so the sprint action is where a player can move in any one direction as far as they can until they hit a wall. So for instance, this green player, he could sprint up to here, or if he was here, he could sprint to here. Now take note, this can cross over cards. So for instance, if the green player was here when he started, he could sprint up to this wall up here, crossing over into another card. So really with the sprint action, you can get up to move up to 7 spaces if things are ideally set up. Also take note, let's say for instance the green player was here, they choose sprint and they go this direction. Even though there's no wall here, the edge of a card would be the end of the sprint action. Okay, the jump action is basically where a player can just jump over any one wall. So for instance, using the green, let's say he was here. There's one wall right above him, so they could jump right there, and that would be their jump action. The climb action is very similar to the jump action, except it has to be over 2 walls. And 2 walls only occur on the borders of 2 different cards. So for instance, if the green was here, there's a wall on this card, and there's a wall on this card. And so using the climb action, the green player can go from here to there. Okay, now we have rotate, the beginning of the more complicated maneuvers or actions. And so when a player wants to rotate, they can rotate any card that does not have a lock cube on it 90 degrees in any direction of their choice. So there's a couple things to keep in mind with the rotate action. Any cubes that are on the card that you want to rotate stay in their relative position, which actually Tabletop Simulator is not very good with, or there might be some kind of setting, I don't know. But when you rotate 90 degrees, the cube stays in its same position relative to the card. So, for instance, if we move this, there's 90 degrees. Oh, it did stay with it. That's good. So now the green cube is here, but it stayed in its relative position with the card. And if you notice, when you place the rotate card, you also put it towards the center of the map. So for instance, you couldn't go like this or up here. It's always towards the corner's got to be in the center of the map. So just like that. And then what happens is you remove any lock cubes from the board that were previously there, and then you place one on the newly rotated card. So now this card is locked, and it opens up the other cards for manipulation. Okay, the swap action has similar qualities as the rotate, except in this case you're taking 2 cards, unlocked cards, and you're just swapping their positions in maintaining cubes in their relative positions. So in this case, if we want to swap this one and this one, you just take this out, take this one, and place there. So you've swapped. And now, similar to the rotate, you remove all the cubes, previously placed locked cubes, and now you would lock the 2 cards that were involved in the swap. Now for the key action, it's very simple. You can either remove a lock cube, or if there is no lock cube, you would add one there, depending on the circumstances that you need it. Now, each card can only have 1, so you couldn't like extra lock 1 card. So it's either remove or add a lock cube. Okay, warp is our final and probably most complicated action. A warp action allows you to go from one edge of a card to the opposite edge of an opposite card in one move. But what has to be in place for this to work is that the player's cube, we're going to use the red player in this instance, has to be on the spot where there's no wall on the outside edge of the card. So there's no wall here. And then on the opposite card, on the opposite edge, there has to be no wall either. In this case, there isn't. So the player with using the warp action can go from here to here. Now, as another example, let's say the player was up here. He wouldn't be able to go from, even though there's no wall on the outside, let me kind of show over a little bit. There's no wall on the outside. He could not go to this spot because there's a wall on this outer edge. So it doesn't matter how the cards are aligned. For instance, he can go from this spot here. There's no bottom wall. He could go up to here. And it doesn't matter if they're turned vertically or horizontally. It's just opposite edges. If there's no wall on either opposite edge, you can take a warp action. So now that we're familiar with the actions, how does gameplay actually work? Well, on a player's turn, they have 3 actions they can do. And one is an optional move your player cube 1 spot in any direction. I say optional, it's usually used, but circumstances might not be advantageous. So you just like the green player would move 1 there or move 1 up. Just 1 move. That's 1 option. The other two are available based on a card that they choose from this tableau. A player has to select a card and do an action based off of that card. So let's take a closer look at this tableau here. So we see we have three cards that are available. So once again, the player has to select a card, and then they do actions based on its position and what's on the card. So let me explain. Let's go with the top action first. The top action is never taken directly from the card it's on. It's always situational based on the cards that are around it. For instance, if the player were to use this card here, and they were going to take a top action, you see how this arrow is pointing to the left? That means this relic action is available to them along with this card. And if you notice, this one over here has an arrow. It's a wraparound effect. So this arrow would be pointing to the swap action. So what's that mean? Well, let's say the player, let's see here. Let's say he chooses the warp card. One of the actions available to him is the relic action. So he could say, okay, I'm using the warp card. I'm going to take a relic action. And he moves the relic cube one space. And then also, I should say, and or, he can also choose from the bottom actions. Now, more actions are available based on its position. So the first card only has this first action available to it, the jump action. The second card has the first and second, and the third card has first, second, and third actions. You got three actions to choose from. And we'll explain a little bit more about, because the third action has more power. We'll explain that a little bit later. But let's say in this instance, the player chooses the warp card. So let's say he did what we said before. He goes, okay, I'm going to use the relic action, move the relic one. I'm going to use my free one action, my one move action, move my player cube one. And then he's going to use the rotate action, because the first and second are available. So he's going to use the rotate action from this card. And so he would then rotate a card 90 degrees. And so those three actions he could choose in any order that he likes. So he could have went move the relic one, perhaps moving it onto another card, rotate that card, and then using his free move action to move on to move one closer to the relic. And so that would be his turn. I should note, just to clarify, that let's say here, like, although he had two options available, he can only choose one from the bottom. Just want to highlight the third most action on these cards. You notice these. Of course, you can only choose that action if it's the cards in the third spot. So this whole thing here, basically, the sprint 3 is the only third action that's available. Now the third action is always more powerful. In this case, the sprint action says you may stop, which is advantageous because you're sprinting across the board, but there's a spot midway that you'd rather stop and take an action to go another direction. Normally you can't. Sprint's all or nothing action. But when the sprint is in the third spot here, you can stop midways, which is a big ability. Pretty much most of the other ones only have, it just says 2 times. So for instance, here it shows jump. So basically you could take that action twice, and what's nice about that is that action is actually separate. So as we explained earlier, you can take your actions in any order. You can separate these 2 jumps. So you can take a jump at the beginning, move, use a top action, and then use your jump at the end. So you can mix and match as much as you want. So these actions in the third spot are definitely more powerful. Okay, so let's show you what would happen here. So let's say the first player, green, he's going to choose this warp card. And he decides he's going to do this rotate action, because he can do the first one or two, the first or second, he can choose one of these. He's going to choose the he's going to choose the rotate action. And so let's kind of zoom out so you can see what happens here. Now these two cannot be rotated because they're locked right now. So he's choosing this card here, and he's going to rotate this. Tabletop Simulator can be kind of funny here. Okay, well, that worked. He's going to rotate it this card. And when you rotate, it's just a 90-degree turn, your choice, either way. And when you rotate or swap, which is fairly similar, the cubes on the card stay in the same relative position. And, well, this isn't a good move, but this is just for purposes of showing you how this works. Okay, so he's rotating this card. And so when you rotate a card, what happens is the player removes any, let me zoom out here, previously placed lock cubes that are on the board, and now this card becomes locked. So this happens with the rotate and swap actions. That you remove the previous ones and then you add the new ones to the board. So really the point I want to show you is what happens now with these cards. So this card has been used. Oh wait, we're not done. It probably doesn't make a difference. I'm going to use the Relic just to say how I can. I'm going to use the Relic. So I used the rotate, then I did the Relic, and now I still have a free action, so I'm going to move down one. And so that would be the green player's entire turn. So now this card has been used. Oops. So we take that out. Come on, tabletop. We slide these over. The remaining ones, we kind of tighten them up to the right. And then the card that was in front of us now goes to the tableau. So a new card is into the, this kind of refreshes it, and this card sits in front of us. So cards are only, this is not in play, so cards that are only in this tableau here are on play. And so the players will keep on rotating ones in and out. And so that's it for a turn, and then it would be the red player's turn, and he would do the same thing. So players take turns until the first person gets to the Relic. Now as the rules are written, that would be the end of the game. But we recommend players play best 2 out of 3 because games can go very quick. And we also recommend that players use like the meta variant, where instead of resetting an entire game to play the best 2 out of 3, actually what would happen would be when the player, in this case, let's say the red player gets to the Relic, and this is the first one of the game, he would actually now move the Relic to a far corner of the board that doesn't have player cubes on it. So let's say the green player was here. He wasn't quite there yet. So now the red player would actually have 4 options. He can't place it on this card or this card because player cubes are on it. So he could place it this corner, this corner, this corner, or this corner. So the 4 farthest corners are open, basically not touching another map. And so basically, let's say he chooses here, he places the cube, play continues now, and so then the game continues. So now the green player would take his turn, and so now they'd be racing to the Relic at this new position. And then they would just play to 2 out of 3 or X out of Y, whatever they've agreed to. We consider this the preferred mode. So that's Relic Raiders in a nutshell. Of course, the rule book goes into more details, but in general, this is the gameplay, and I hope you'll give it a chance. And in the next day or so, I'm going to record a full playthrough so you can see from start to finish how a game can play out. But thanks again for your interest, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.